Ladies and gentlemen, IRX17 audience, this is Nico Grupp from Solar Powered Games. They're developers of Highrisers, which you saw earlier in one of the exhibits this morning. And he will be talking about the skill tree, how to provide meaningful change in an RPG. So I will leave that to you. Nico, take it away.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Nico. I'm glad to be here. So we'll be talking about the skill tree today and how to provide meaningful choice in RPG. So first, what are our goals as a designer? Of course, it's to provide the fun. There's been lots of debate and research where the fun lies, and there are several different aspects of fun. But when we're talking about a skill tree, there's a certain aspect of game and a certain group of gamers that we are focusing on. So this is not about the adrenaline-driven, skill-based gameplay where you say that speed of mouse clicking or reaction time or something is the prime thing. And it's not those type of players that seek that. Of course, that's a generalization, and we're going a bit into cliches here. But I think that this is a useful mindset to start with. So when we're talking about optimizing a skill tree as a designer for meaningful choice, we're not optimizing for this bunch here. We're more about those ones. So as a player, you can find different choice from the game, and I'm a bit more of those this little finger type. I feel good in a game when I feel smart. This can mean smarter than my human opponents, or this can mean smarter than the system, or if I did something clever. If I win because I made a smart decision, that's the point. That's where the player get the joy from, and that's how we as designer must optimize the system. So there's this quite famous, you could call it a bon mot by now, quote of Sid Meier that the games are a series of interesting decisions. It's not totally clear when he said that. I had different sources. I think it was first credited to some talk on a PAX, but then he re-quoted himself. And sometimes it's interesting decisions, sometimes it's interesting choice, sometimes it's meaningful choice. But it all boils down to the same thing. There's a nice Gamma Sutra article where there's put some effort into researching what's the background of this and what he means. And when analyzing this in regard to RPGs or generally to those games that this type of player likes, then you can boil down the term of meaningful choice as a base component of successful gameplay. And it's a bit hard to define what meaningful really means. I find it easier to set up a set of rules what it not means or how you can prevent it. And that's it. That three different conditions must not be, what do you say, condition is fulfilled. The choice must not be uninformed, it must not be obvious, it must not be hollow. So what does it mean? Uninformedness happens when a player does not have sufficient information to make his decision. So here this Mario example, pick a box, its content will help you, but you have no information whatsoever what content is in what box. It's completely random to you because you have no information based on to make this decision. Fun fact is that actually in the implementation of the thing, the output of the box was already set no matter which box you chose. So the system decided, oh, you'll get a star, and it didn't matter if you took the left, the middle, or the right box. You always got the star. So this is something you want to avoid in any game where you want the player to feel joy by feeling smart, because he cannot make any smart decision. Now, the second thing you want to try to avoid is obviousness. if one choice is obviously superior to another, then it's also not good. So in this example, it's not so, it's obviously not a big deal if you should go left or right, because if the choice is obvious, then I have no way of feeling smart, because it did not put any obstacle to my mind that I had to overcome, and thus it prevents myself from feeling smart. In an RPG, it would be if you have two different weapons. One does 25 damage per second, and the other one only 12, and they're totally identical. It's not a real elaborate choice which one to equip, unless there are other factors that play in. But if you boil it down to this, obviousness should obviously be avoided. Now the third one is hollowness. If the possible outcome of a choice are all equal in terms of the expected utility, the choice is hollow. Utility here, it's a mathematical term that if we do not go too deep into math, we could say it's like how beneficial this is for me. Sometimes it's a bit hard to compare things like, well, should I go to the gym tonight and work out and do something on long-term health, or should I stick to the couch and binge watch Doctor Who, which give me short-term benefits? It's hard to put a price tag on those actions, but in the theory, you always can do this. And luckily, the games are always based on mathematical structures. So a player will always do this min-maxing thing in his head, whether he wants it or not. And you can always put a tag on the utility, at least in theory. Sometimes it's a little more complicated and the system is harder to grasp. But when it all boils down to the machine code, there will be a superior or less good option. So if we stick to the example with the two swords, one with 25 damage, the other one with 12, you can say, haha, but the one with 12 has 100% higher crit chance than the other one. But then the crit chance, on the other hand, might boil down to, okay, if you crit, then you deal double damage. And in the end, you can put a price tag on it. And what you don't want is two options that are totally equal, because then say, if you have two swords, or like a warhammer and a sword, and both do 25 damage per second, and the only difference is like the combat animation or so, then you can say, okay, it's a more personal choice of preference, what style you like. If you would like a Viking warrior with a warhammer, or a more European medieval knight with a sword, okay, but from a systems perspective, it doesn't matter. And you want to avoid this. Now, if you watch and you already see, this might be a little bit problematic, because hollowness and obviousness, they contradict each other. Either one option is better than the other, but then it's obvious, or they're identical, then it's hollow. And that's the paradox of meaningful choice, how to achieve this. It's not really a solvable problem. I have to come, for me personally, to a conclusion of how to address this. And I do this by hiding the utility, but with means that the player can overcome. You can even give examples of this in a non-mathematical way. Imagine in a game, some adventure game or RPG where you travel over the world, and then you're standing in front of a cave. And some old man is sitting there and saying, beware, in this cave, dangerous monsters creep. I will give you one of two shields, either the red shield, which will protect you from fire, or the green shield, which will protect you from poison. Now, if you have no clue whatsoever what monsters will lurk in the cave, then it's basically an uninformed choice. Or if you have no idea if there will be fire or toxic enemies in the game. If you know that the cave will be full of fire-breathing dragons, then it's quite obvious that the red shield is the dominant choice. But if you can like tell the player, but not in a direct way, that the fire-breathing dragons will be the enemies encountered. For example, if you put ashes and scorched skeletons around the entranceway, then it's a hint that the player has to decipher before he can make his decision. So now this is more of a, as you see, in a non-mathematical example of how you can use this principle. But you give the player the information he needs to make the decision, but you don't give it bluntly in his face. There was, when Diablo 3 came out, I was a bit repelled by the new system because they basically just calculated everything into one value, and then you had whatever weapon you found, there was just the damage per second where you give them. So this this obstacle, this necessity for you to decipher the information given was a bit taken away from the player. And I personally was not too happy with it, but I heard that in the meantime they've adjusted it a little, and then you can reach now more synergies, and not everything is obviously put in your face. So when we had talked about this utility thing, there is a mathematical part that's called game theory that's actually really important for game designers, although the name in the beginning was taken for another reason. It is more a system of intelligent agents we all have their understanding of the rules, and they try to optimize their own gain. So, and this could be modeled as a game, so that's why the name comes from. But still, it is a very useful and I think integral part of game designers' education. Here in this example, it's shown a so-called payoff matrix. You have the three options that the player 1 can choose in the lines, and in the columns are the three options that the player 2 can choose. And the outcome, as this is a so-called zero-sum game, so whatever one player wins, the other player loses. The outcome for player 1 is put into the grid. So a positive one is like you win the game, and it's a fictional unit of utility. It could be like, hey, we play rock, paper, scissors, and whoever loses has to buy the other one a beer or so, or you could do whatever. It's just a mathematical unit so you can compare things. And as you see, okay, if you come to the good old question, which of the three is the best thing, you can take it like Bart Simpson says, yeah, the good old stone. Nobody beats the good old stone. But obviously you see that each option loses one time again against another, and is tied against one option and wins against one. And you can apply a game theoretical solution methods to this, like minimax or what's it called? The guy got a Nobel Prize, was played by Russell Crowe in Beautiful Mind.
Game or not game theory. It's
what was Nash? Okay.
Yeah.
Nash equilibrium is also a solution, a way to solve such a problem. And if we solve it, the question is, which strategies should we play? Of course, you can argue with, okay, if you're playing versus Bart Simpson, he will always do the stone, so you should take paper. But if you are out against an intelligent agent, which has the same knowledge as you, the solution of the game is complete randomization. So to get the best output, you should take each one with 1/3 probability. And over the long run, you will get an output of 0, because you will win 1/3 of the games, you will lose 1/3 of the games, and you will tie 1/3 of the game. So regarding meaningful choice, obviously we see that no option here is dominant over the other. But does that mean that rock, paper, scissors is a well-balanced game? Well, that depends. It is as well-balanced as it can be, and it lacks any dominant or dominated choices. We will see what this means when we say, okay, let's imagine rock, paper, scissors here is just a symbol for some more complicated game that we have out, and it's quite successful. And now management says, hey, that's cool. Let's add a new unit. Let's add well. I don't know if in English-speaking territory this is very common. In Germany, we have this well thing where you have your fist open so it forms a hole, and then it's just a fourth option. I think from Big Bang Theory, I heard of this lizard Spock thing. Well, it doesn't matter. We add well, and the rules of well, for those who don't know it, well is tied versus another well, and paper can cover the opening of the well, so it wins. But a rock and scissors both fall in. So this is the payoff matrix, and now we think, okay, obviously well wins. Oh, there's a mistake. And the scissors, well versus scissors, that's a -1. It should be a +1. It's I don't know.
For the scissors.
Yeah. The scissors lose, and since the values are the utility for player 1, it's the other way around. So well wins against 2 others, rock and scissors, and loses only against 1. That should mean, actually, one could get the impression that it's in the Nash equilibrium. It's beneficial to play well more often. But the problem with the thinking is that your opponent, the other agent, also knows this. And if he knows that you will have a reason to play well more often, he has a reason to play paper more often, which, on the other hand, then leads to scissors being played more often, and so on. So if we watch those things closely, we see that well and rock have a certain relationship. You are never in a situation where you play well and wish, damn, I wish I had played rock. But you are in a situation where you play rock and wished that you played well when your opponent plays well. And so we see that there is never a reason to switch from rock to well. And that means that rock is a dominated strategy. And this means that in a new equilibrium, you play paper, scissors, and well with 1/3 probability, and you never ever play rock. So as a game designer who has invested in the sound effects and artworks and balancing and blah, blah, blah of rock, this is a total failure, because now the players will soon find out, and the internet forums will be like, oh, since the introduction of world, rock is totally, you should no longer do it, and they will cry out, and nobody will play it anymore, and the effort you put into that thing are wasted. So a dominated strategy is something that you should avoid at all costs. And that's not only that's both for RPGs or for real-time strategy games, or even for an ego shooter. If there's one weapon that's clearly better than all the others, or clearly worse than all the others. If you have one option that's clearly better than all the others, it's even worse. Then you have a so-called dominant strategy, and this devalues all other strategies, because all the players will only use this certain strategy. So that's something you have to avoid. And in the end, you end up with some kind of equilibrium where every valid strategy is played with a certain probability. It does not always have to be as symmetrical as here with rock, paper, scissors. But if you have a system where each option is valid to be used with a certain probability greater 0, then you have a well-balanced system. And that is something you should strive to achieve both with RPGs or with real-time strategies, and generally with pretty much all games where you put focus on that.
Can I interrupt real quick? An audience question.
Sure.
Speaking of the meaningful choice, going back to your previous metaphor of the poison shield or the fire shield, couldn't you just put poisonous snakes into the cave with the fire-breathing dragons so that the player still has the choice as to which power they're going to mitigate?
You mean that both problems are in the cave?
But they only have one choice, one option that they get to mitigate.
Yeah, that's totally a valid thing. It still boils down in the end, unfortunately, to one of those. Either dragons and snakes do like the same damage and the shields each block the same damage, then the choice is hollow, or there are like only 5 snakes but 500 dragons, and the dragons deal double damage and burn damage also does overtime damage, then the red shield is dominant. But yes, it's good thinking. You could even like add something, maybe they act differently. So from a mathematical point of view, they are the same amount and they deal about the same damage, but there are more snakes, but they are easier to avoid or something like that. You see, the more fluffy this gets, the more away we get from mathematics, the harder it gets to balance. But yeah, it's a good thinking. Another way of balancing it would be maybe in the cave are the fire dragons, and the red shield will do you a good service. But after the cave, there comes some mountain level, and after that, there come the swarms. And the swarms are full with poisonous snakes. And if you like chose the green shield and you manage to get by the dragon without this, then later you will be lucky because on a higher level you will have the green shield for your protection. Phantasy Star 2 did this, where you had 2 characters. You could only take like 3 or 4 characters into your active party, and there was you, the biologist, which was great versus all kind of biomonsters, and Kane the Wrecker, which was great against the machines. And in the beginning, you only encountered biomonsters, but the experienced player knew, once the government on Palm will outlaw you, they will send the hunter robots, and if you have not leveled up Kane's with his skills, then you will get into trouble. But then the good solution was to take Kane along while you were actually fighting the biomonsters, and then later when Kane would actually be useful, the experienced players knew that after the robot stuff, again biomonsters come. So you would always play with this character that was currently not good for optimizing later, and it was mathematically clever, but it felt a little bit so yes, here's an example of a dominated strategy in an RTS. This was Command and Conquer 2. I'm not sure if in the end this remained, but there was a time when I was playing it on small scale actively, and it basically turned out that everything besides tank rush sucked. You could build infantry, you could try to get a Kirov fleet, you could try all kind of stuff, but in the end, the only thing that really worked was tank rush. And tank rush was actually the headline is wrong. It's not a dominated strategy. It's even worse. It's a dominant strategy. It devalued all other strategies, and this is something you should always struggle to avoid at all costs. So, the skill tree, or also the tech tree. I will explain that later, but basically it boils down that an RPG from this aspect of game design is not very different from a real-time strategy game, or also turn-based strategy game for that. So what is a skill tree? I'm sure everyone has a rough idea of what it does. It unlocks skills. It unlocks something. If you have a tech tree, then it unlocks the capability of building a certain unit. Here, the Diablo 2 Paladin skill tree, it unlocks a skill that you can actively or passively use, which you could not use before. In a classical skill tree, it's a tree with branches, so that prior skills are prerequisite to unlock later ones. So you could not get the... you needed the Holy Bolt before you can get the hammer. And if you did never unlock the Holy Bolt, you could not get the hammer, which often led to builds where you said, okay, I want to build the Hammer Dean because it's the coolest build. I just put 1 and only 1 point in Holy Bolt because I'm never going to use it. I just need it for a prerequisite. Some have the options of putting more points in it to make it stronger. So here in Diablo, you can do that. You can level it up, and each point makes them stronger. And it's optional that they have synergies. So this optional, as I say, with like in what's this called? This Dr. Evil movement with quotations.
Air quotes.
Air quotes, yeah, I say this in air quotes. Thank you. Because actually, this synergies are the salt in the soup. So synergies are making players feel smart since the early days of gaming. And even if it's something simple like here, it's in a magic card. If you see the Goblin King, you read through it. Other Goblin creatures get +1/+1 and have Mountain Walk. So other goblin creatures benefit from it. So it's quite obvious. If I played a Goblin King, I have a synergy with playing lots of other goblins. It's not a big mental loop you have to jump through, but it still makes you feel smart, and that's a good thing. So with the skill trees, there was some development. So you have this character grid, where all the characters basically are in the same interconnected tree, and you could get everywhere. But like for Final Fantasy X with Lulu the mage, the black mage, you started near the black mage skills, and if you wanted to get to the white mage healing skills, you had to invest lots of points to get there. But you had more flexibility. Then this is an example from Borderlands 2. Here you could reallocate the skill points that you've set, something which was not possible before in games like Diablo 2. And if you put sufficient points into one skill, you could unlock certain special skills. You can see that some of them are green; those are maxed, and whenever you max a skill, might be some additional effect. So you see that there are no connections anymore between the skills. This is that lower skills are no longer necessarily prerequisites. The ability to unlock skills are locked to the player level. This means that you do not have to do stuff like with the Holy Bolt, where you just put 1 point in to get there. You could just unlock a certain skill when you are at that player level. Here is another example of undesired prerequisites. It's from a board game, Twilight Imperium, where you want to build the War Sun. This is this game's Death Star. But in order to get there through the tech tree, which is, as I already said, in most cases similar to a skill tree, you had to not only buy Hyla 5 assault lasers and deep space cannon, but also envirocompensator and Salvant tools, which you might actually not want if you're playing an aggressive style. Space Dogs 1/1 resource when producing it is not such a great deal, but you have to do it if you want to get your War Sun. So this is one of the issues skill tree has with this fixed order, which you can mitigate if you do something like here. And then with Diablo 3, and similar games, you had effects like you could combine things through skill runes, where you had just through the combination of two aspects, you could get a multitude of effects without increasing the amount of basic effects. So the key elements that we have are limited options, or better, we have more options available, but we have limited possibilities to use them. You have synergies, which are actually sort of it in every direction. So even if you're here with the Diablo thing, you say, okay, I want to go for whatever increased attack speed because it's beneficial with my equipment stuff, and then you max it out to this. And they should support your style of play. Obviously, if you think of a Deus Ex style game, when you want to go on the sneaky trip, then it's not beneficial for you to take a heavy weapons skill or something like that. So, and if you observe all those elements, then we can see that basically those also belong to the things like the inventory equipment of an RPG or an adventure game. You have only limited options. You can only take one armor, although you have more available. Synergies are the sort of it. If you say, okay, I want to go on maximum leech, then all your equipment must be optimized for it, and that should support your style of play. Or this also goes for the build order of a strategy game here of StarCraft. Those elements are always the same, and therefore the balancing rules that we apply are also the same. So here's an example of dominant choice. Actually, it's not a skill tree; it's the augmentations tree in Deus Ex, but it's the same. There's an option to take several augmentations, but each takes a slot, and if you use certain slot, then you cannot put the same category in. I think Aqualung was in this torso thing, and this is what an internet guide wrote about it. They say that it's a waste because just use the swim skill, which is cheaper, and you can go through all underwater passages, and later you will have cheap consumables that help you use it. So although the idea behind the Aqualung to enable multiple styles of gameplay was good, here it was not used successfully because it's a dominated choice. So now I talk about what we did in Highrisers. Highrisers is a pixel-styled urban survival RPG for PC. So pixel-styled urban survival RPG. You could basically say that it's I Am Legend meets the Martian, because you have this horror thing where you have light-averse zombie-like creatures, and you have those as a solution. You have to use your brain to science your way out of this in pixels. You have a skill tree. Actually, you have 4 skill trees because you play 4 survivors, and each has its own skill tree. We were trying to avoid predefined roles for each of the characters. And in the game, you have several fields to cover. Okay, at this point, I wanted to skip the funny video. It's not so funny, and I think I'm a bit...
You've got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, okay. Let's not waste 1 minute on a funny video. It was a funny video of Final Fantasy characters, which are base classes, and it was the white mage trying to do damage, so trying to act out of his role, and it totally failed. It was Dorkly video. It was pretty fun. And then he did like a crit damage, and it was double damage, and he dealt 2 damage in the stealth one. Yeah. So the point of it was, you have games where you have predefined roles. We wanted to avoid this. So those are screenshots of the 4 skill trees of the 4 characters, and you can see that each skill tree starts in the middle and has like 3 branches. Those are the tasks, the general tasks that you have to deal with in Highrisers. So you have the nightly defense on the left, because each night when it gets dark, the dreamers will walk up the building and try to kill you. You have the food thing, because your characters need food, and you have to find or grow it or hunt even a little in this urban environment, although it's only rats and stuff. You have the combat thing, because you also have to battle some of the dreamers at day. You have to repair the helicopter. So you have this damaged helicopter on the rooftop of your building, and you will never get it to make it real flying, but you can repair it so that it is capable of like doing a small leap on the rooftop of the next building, and that way you can traverse through the city. You have scavenging. You must go down and scavenge equipment and materials and all kind of stuff. You have research. You can build stuff that can make you build better stuff, basically. You have healing. So all those tasks in general must be covered in the game. So we could have put up special roles for each, and we kind of have, but we tried to avoid it a little. For example, Ike. Ike is a pilot, and he was in the military when he was younger, and he's also a trained mechanic. So these are his 3 branches in his skill tree. So you could totally focus on the mechanic part, and his skills there all resolve about repairs and building machinery and engines and doing metalworks. So most skills in Highrisers unlock new crafting recipes, but I also have certain active or passive effect. Like, for example, with metalworks, you can craft items that you only find normally, like cogs and gears, but it also makes you just craft everything metal-based faster. You could specialize on his pilot abilities, so that's basically dealing with repairing the helicopter and getting it into the air. Or you could focus on his third branch, its military branch, where his skills resolve about combat and entrenchments and building and maintaining weapons. So this helicopter issue is a must-have, because if you for those of you who saw the trailer when the guys presented this earlier this day, you cannot leave the building without the helicopter. So there's no way to get out on the ground floor. So you must do it. You must repair the helicopter at least so much that you can leave with it. So, and obviously this is a thing for the pilot, because all his skills revolve about the helicopter optimization and repairing stuff. But if we need Ike to do the pilot stuff, then obviously we cannot go into the mechanic and military branch, and then all the efforts we would have put into this would be wasted. So it was important for us not to lock him into this role and to focus him only on this option. So there must be other options to repair the helicopter, and so we put emphasis on each character that he also has some way of helping with the helicopter. Another thing is that I think this slide does not belong here. I'll return to it later. So here, Anne, for example, can focus on her process engineering stuff and can produce gas with which you can build auxiliary balloons to get the helicopter higher up so that he can go into glide mode. And Mo has a craftsman branch where he can remove the outer cover and use some lightweight construction stuff so that he can reduce the weight of the helicopter so that he can fly with lower engine capabilities. And Jess can also do stuff. She has a hacker and microelectronics branch where she can't really help with the helicopter, but you can build small drones which can carry equipment over to the next building, so that you have not so much to carry along with the helicopter. And for Ike's skills, even if in the military branch, for example, you have a field medic thing so that you can do a little bit of healing. Or in his pilot branch, there's weather forecast, which is useful for the helicopter, but also if you try to grow crops, or if you want to know if it's worth investing time and effort into building solar panels on your rooftop.
5-minute warning, Nico.
Okay, all right. We did also put in alternative requirements. So those are my fancy mock-ups. In order to build a capacitor, you need one of two skills. Either the high energy skill of Jess or the high voltage skill of Anne. Either one was sufficient to unlock the power capacitor to build it. But if you unlocked both of them, you could build a supercapacitor, basically a better version of it. And this thing we pulled through the whole game. So you can build a crossbow with either of two skills, but if you unlock both skills, which for a min-maxer would actually be a waste of points, you can get a better version of the crossbow. So that way you could even distribute the task in a way that you can say, for example, if you make a build where you totally focus on combat and knightly defense, you say, then I don't have to put so much effort into healing because they will never hurt me anyway. I will kill everyone before he arrives. You could even do that with, like, for example, you can ignore the helicopter pretty much. You must invest a little bit so you can get it into the air. But if you say, I will never ever try to transport much of my equipment, you can get away with it. So why did we choose made the decisions that we did? For example, why did we not allow reskill? Because it's the fancy new thing. Highrisers has this roguelike gameplay, And the sessions should be, well, not short, but relatively short. It's not like that, like you play 1 month on the same session. You play and you traverse through the buildings, and eventually you will fail. And the next time you just try a different set of skills. That's why we chose not to give you any reskill abilities. Why not fixed classes? I mean, what's so bad about fixed classes? Nothing really. It's kind of a personal preference that I don't want to see my survivors in a certain role, and it gives you more flexibility with the builds, I think. And why not attributes? Like you remember Diablo, when you put with each level up, you did not only get a skill point, but also the attribute point, which you could put in. Well, basically, they don't fit so much for the crafting focus we've put in Highrisers, and most often they go in a too obvious direction. Like if you have a mage, you just put so much into strength that you can carry the armor that you want to wear, and everything else goes either into energy or vitality. So it's not really a smart exercise for you as a player. Why did we put in the prerequisites? Because with that, okay, prerequisites lead to things like you skilling something which you actually don't want just to get the skill behind it. Well, we did this because the branches in our skill tree are quite short. We only have a depth of, come on, here you see it. You only have a maximum depth of 3, so you do not waste so much to get into the skills that you have. And we have some high-level techniques, for example, some fancy machinery like a laser cannon. You can build a laser gun with the right stuff if you find it, but it requires 3 skills, and most of times 2 of them are high-leveled. And we'll have lots of those things in the game, but you will only see them rarely because you need to have the right configuration of your skills. And so each time that you have a new build, you will find hopefully a new way of a new high-class machinery in your late game. So if you think back to the beginning where we talked about the mathematical aspects, how can you balance this now? It's a little bit of a tough cookie. You can definitely try to balance general things like food production value or damage output, where you can put numbers on it, and that's what we're going to do in order to make sure that no character is overpowered, although you play all 4s anyway, and no skill is or skill branch is overpowered or dominated. But with things like that, where it's a bit harder to put numbers on, you could either let an AI play through all versions, or you just watch your internet community once the game is out and see which I say is the newest hot shit. And then you must find the nerve to nerf it, to make it weaker if it's dominant, and which they say is totally useless, like in the example with the aqua lung. If you read something here like this in a forum about your game, and you still have the capability of balancing it post-launch, you should do it in order to achieve the balance that is necessary for the meaningful choice, which is something like maybe not the ultimate goal, but one very important goal for balancing in skill trees. So,
thank you, Nico, so much. I definitely appreciate that. I've learned a lot. I'm not a game developer by any means, but I now have I think I have a better understanding as to why some of my favorite game devs have made the decisions that they have.
I'm glad you like it. I hope you and the audience could take something away from it.
Some of the people in chat I know are going to try and rewatch or watch the rest of it after it goes up on the website in the archive. So thank you so much again for that. And
thank you for giving me the chance to speak.